have you now.
You're fulfilling your destiny.
Show me again the power of the darkness.
D20 Radio, where gamers roll. D20radio.com. Welcome back, everyone, to the Knights of Ren, episode 208. This week, I have Jay as my host, and we have a special guest coming from the Jedi Trials, Mr. D House himself. Welcome to the show. How are you doing today, man?
I'm good, man. Glad to be here.
Awesome. And Jay, how are you doing this week?
Outside of a pretty poor tournament performance, I'm doing fairly well.
Okay, that's good. Why don't you, well, we'll get to that tournament in a little bit. Welcome to the show. We've got all kinds of stuff for you listeners, and the first thing I want to do is just give D-House a quick little interview, and, the first question we always ask our guests, tell us a little bit about Star Wars. Like, what got you into Star Wars?
Oh, man, that's a great question. I think for me, it happened as many guys, just as a child. I just love the movies. I think I watched Return on the Jedi on repeat like 8 times one time, just on a Saturday. It was great. And so I just loved Star Wars as a kid. I collected all the action figures. I was a completist, so I had to have everything. I had to have every single action figure, even if that meant, having my mom buy the slave version of Princess Leia, but she kept it in a closet because she didn't think it was appropriate for me to be having that as a kid. So, man, I just loved Star Wars from as a kid, and then I got into card games, even got into some of the old Star Wars card games, Pokemon at the same time, but kind of led to now I love Destiny, and I'm on a podcast with Destiny, and I just love all things Star Wars and card game related, so here I am.
All right, cool. Tell us a little bit about, your show, what you guys talk about. Go ahead and plug your stuff.
Absolutely. Well, we're the good guys. I don't know how, as a Jedi Trial person, I'm on a Knights of Ren podcast right now. So Corey and I, Corey also known as Coup Master Coup, we're here in Lexington, Kentucky, and we play a lot of games together. We started playing X-Wing together, but really we were both kind of geared more toward card games in general. So we got into Destiny. Actually, as soon as the announcement came out from FFG about Destiny, I was like, Corey, we got to play this. We have to do this. And finally, he jumped on board, and he's like, this is amazing, even before the game came out. And so it wasn't long after just playing on TTS and then the pre-release, I got that text from him. He's like, dude, we have to do a podcast about this. I was like, yeah, I know. So after going through just a couple name iterations, eventually we landed on the Jedi Trials. And so it's actually great. Corey's uncle is part of a production company, and he does all of our editing and the hard work. But we get together and record as often as possible, not as often as you guys. I would love to record as often as you guys do. But we just love bringing as much community content as we can. And definitely our flavor is a lot. We joke around a lot. We laugh. We make fun of each other. We make stupid movie quote jokes because that's just who we are. That's how we play games too. If you ever play games against either one of us, there's a lot of laughter at the table. And so we just love talking about that stuff and bringing as much content as we can. You can find us on iTunes at The Jedi Trials, or go to thejeditrials.com to stream from there. And then we also started recording games for YouTube with commentary from me and him. You can actually search Across the Saga on YouTube and find us there. Across the Saga entails all the different podcasts that we're part of. There's one for the Star Wars LCG and Stay on Target for X-Wing. So we're going to put more games on there, but we're going to be doing a lot of Destiny stuff on there. We've had a lot of traction already. So yeah, check us out.
Awesome. All right. Previously, Jay, you were mentioning something about a tournament. So why don't you give us the breakdown? Because I know we're going to be talking about a new deck that you've been working on and go into the details of that. But, tell us how it fared, what you saw, what you played against, and all that good stuff.
On Saturday, I went to a small event over at Outflank Games in Fairfield. There were 14 competitors. The deck diversity was pretty good. Definitely saw some strange stuff, including what I brought along. I ended up going 1-3, which is pretty frustrating. That's my worst performance to date. A lot of it had to stem from not being completely familiar with the deck that I was bringing, and also just some cold rolls, and just when it all combines together kind of led me to some tilt, and unfortunately poisoned me throughout the event. But still some highlights. I brought a Elite Phasma Trooper Night Sister deck, and even to people who I've said, like, oh yeah, I've played a deck like that, and then I tell them my list, they've said, I haven't played a deck like that. So it was pretty fun. I made a lot of sequencing errors and playing some stuff out of order. The deck comprises of 14 upgrades. I'm bringing 2 Holocron, 2 Force Choke, 2 Mind Probe, 2 Immobilize, 2 Force Throw, 2 Force Trainings, and 2 Hidden in Shadow. And then the rest of the deck is all events. I have Logistics, Tactical Mastery, Power of the Force, No Mercy, the best defense, Flank, Deflect, and Isolation. This is pretty much a, how everyone just calls these, the Holocron list. And then it's a red-blue suite of strong defensive options of what's available. A lot of people, usually prefer yellow on the removal side, but obviously that's not a color I'm bringing. And I did test the Bala variant, but I really liked some of the explosiveness that the blue brings to this deck, and I think that Phasma is a very fascinating character to attach Holocron to, and you can do some really dirty stuff while keeping her very, very protected with dual guardians, flanking, the best defensing, isolation, and deflect all, do a very good job of keeping her alive. Also, in some emergency situations, you also have Night Sister's trigger, and of course, immobilize, choke, and throw, doing their jobs on keeping you protected. So that's the shell of what I brought. Oh, and I was running Emperor's Throne Room as the battlefield for the special synergy on trying to help get that Holocron ramp out, or probes or throws or whatever you may need. Because if you're using that battlefield and you're fairly well established, going for those early auto triggers can just seal games.
Yeah, that's really interesting too, because what's funny is I've been running Elite Phasma Trooper Night Sister as well, and exactly like you just said, as you read off your list, I was like, that's nothing like what I'm running. They're definitely, what I noticed in running this combination too, when you get access to those blue events, along with Guardian and the best defense, it is so easy to control every single die that your opponent rolls. I felt like every single game that I've done it, they roll whatever they roll. I'm like, I can do something about that. I never feel like I don't have options. And with other decks, I feel like sometimes there are those times where I just can't do anything about that. I'm just going to take 6 damage to the face. But with the combination of red and blue and some of those like force throws and chokes and deflects and feel your anger, things like that, I feel like I always have options with that particular list. So that's really interesting that you're going heavy on the blue, and I'm particularly intrigued by your addition of No Mercy.
Yeah, so one of the things that I've been learning and being frustrated about is when I don't play yellow, I don't feel like I have enough explosivity, and that's why I've been pretty much married to like the Ebala Django list for so long, is I can't get enough fight dirty, I can't get enough backup muscle, and arm to the teeth and all those effects where just essentially a little goes a long way and it like closes out, or you can deal damage sort of like off rotation or off dice. And granted, you still need dice to activate No Mercy, but when your opponent's staring at like 1 ranged and 2 ranged, they're like, oh, I'm about to take 3, and then you slap them for like 6 and evaporate, one of their wounded characters. Like that kind of like cutting their turn short, or if they like rolled out really well and you just go, okay, well that guy's dead, and they lose all their dice. Like the goal of this deck is to kind of like make those intermediary plays and sort of deny them by sort of having like out of nowhere damage potential if built correctly. I will say I didn't perform super well, and I'm not even certain what the ceiling like level of this deck is as far as like people ask like, do I really think this is competitive? I do think it is, but I do think the deck has a couple of problems. Like there's definitely some cards in there, like I use Hidden Shadow and Force Training, which people are probably scratching their heads, but those are cheap blue upgrades that do not require Holocron to put stuff on Phasma to sort of like even out and get things on the board quicker to make Power of the Force more important more quickly, but those would quickly be replaced by, you know, some of the more varied stuff that I'm certain is coming into the next set. So things like that will probably get moved around. Also, you know, like F11 was originally in the list, and that's a very hard card to cut because it's so incredibly powerful and versatile, and it synergizes with all the damage. And it also has a special side, so you can like do it in a special chain. Insanely good card. You know, if you want to run something like this and you'd rather run F11, like it pretty much fits in literally any slot if you don't have the force chokes or the like. So definitely keep that in mind. F11 perfectly fits in the deck. It's actually in contention with Immobilize right now. Still like Immobilize. It's still one of my favorite cards, but still too many times it feels like lose slower instead of make the impactful play, but it really depends on how good you are with the card. Another highlight though is Tactical Mastery. Obviously, like being able to like deal damage, like deal range damage and do all your specials can be just like extremely crushing, and it lets you like cheat out little effects like that. And again, because you mentioned No Mercy, like for those listening, there are 22 blue cards in this deck, so you're very, very likely to, you know, be able to add 3-4 damage with almost all your hands. The red cards that are in here are the best defense. I swear by that card. Amusingly, with all the damage that you guardian off with your Night Sister and your Stormtrooper, I tend to use the best defense to actually pull the damage onto Phasma and try to keep things as spread as possible and just take out problem dice, or of course, you know, pull more than 3 damage. So it's kind of cool having best defense on Phasma, and thematically it's just kind of neat that she also tanks for her subordinates. So
yeah, and it's so good for if they roll out force throws and things like that, where you don't want to roll out anybody, you need to get rid of that force throw. You can't guardian the force throw special. So the best defense is obviously one of the best cards in the game because of that alone.
Yeah, 100% agree. Logistics is a card that I early on wasn't a huge fan of, but now I've kind of swum back 150%. Logistics is great. Mostly what I like about it is it cycles, and it doesn't actually, well, not so much cycles, but like it doesn't cost you an extra action to do, and it still generates you increased cash flow, and it gets a card out of your hand. So that's what I meant by cycle, is like you use it, you get the gain, and then you'll draw more for your next turn. Because one thing that I'm learning that I need to be a lot more careful about is how many cards I hang on to, like between rounds. I'm hanging on to too much removal lately, and then I'm not obviously drawing any upgrades or any improvements for my characters. And Logistics is the perfect sweet spot of getting a card on my hand, ramping my economy, and then obviously that economy should help me play more cards. So that's been great. And then lastly, we have Flank. I mean, it's a 3-person squad. There's zero reason not to run Flank, so obviously that has to be in there. But everything else is blue. The nice thing about No Mercy as well is that cards like Deflect, if you're playing against a melee deck that doesn't have range, well then instead of Deflect just being discard fodder, it's also No Mercy fodder, which is fantastic. So I really like that kind of inward synergy. And then I really want to talk about the card The Power of the Force. It's been like my secret goal of making this card like really potent and really strong, and that was one of the impetuses of creating this deck. And Power of the Force, I've come to realize, is practically like Force Strike plus more.
Yes,
it works on nearly anything. I think, like, I even think people who are messing around with like Vader Jabba or, Vader Dooku or whatever those like little funny discard combinations, you should actually really strongly consider Power of the Force in those lists and like do some disgusting heavy discard plays. It works on discard, it works on money, works on focus. It's completely awesome.
It literally won me the game at a tournament in the top cut because I was running Qui-Gon Rey, and I used Power of the Force on a Force Protection discard side because I just knew the way he was playing that he had armed to the teeth in his hand. And so I had 3 blue upgrades, did Force Protection discard side, discarded his arm to the teeth, kept Qui-Gon alive, and then was able to put enough damage on his Bala. So it's Power of the Force is very underrated and is such a powerful card late game. Early game, it's awful, but late game is really good.
So, real quick breakdown. My first round opponent was an Ephasma Bala Trooper deck. It was a bit of a knockdown drag out, and the final round actually came down to I had initiative, I had a 1 health Stormtrooper. And again, this previous version of the deck had F11s, and he had both F11s in hand. He had a 1 health Phasma with F11, Commanding Presence, and a Holdout Blaster. And that was his E Phasma. So I start the round, I tactical, I roll out, I get resource, miss. And I was like, oh, crap. So I discarded to reroll, and I got 3 damage on the board. So I was like, all right, well, I mean, he'll roll out, and then I should get him. He tactical masteried. I was like, all right, GG, this is it. He rolled double focus, shield discard, or not discard, shield. It's locked in my brain, but he didn't roll any damage. It was absurd. Like, he definitely rolled like 2+2s. He rolled a 1 focus side, a double focus side on the Commanding Presence, and a miss. And that was it. That was the game. It felt super weird. And in those situations, it's frustrating because like you don't really feel good about those wins, even though it's a dice game. Like, I feel like I should have lost that. And there were definitely moments earlier in the event or earlier in the match where I probably could have played some things better and not ended up in that situation. Like, winning like that, I mean, it was a good game. He played very well, and kind of how it ended there. My next round opponent was playing Jabba Vader, and he managed to mill me out, and it was really freaking close. And I definitely missed opportunities to use Night Sister to possibly squeeze out damage in other areas. That was one thing I was not utilizing, was making Night Sister like do work for me to try and land on special sides on some of my stuff. He was incredibly efficient at denying me my holocrons. I had 2 holocrons in my first hand. I thought this is the dream, like, for all the Power of the Force synergy. And I had Mind Probe in my hand. I drew Mind Probe second turn. I was like, this should go well, but he managed to keep me off of my holocrons enough that I had to hard cast a Mind Probe, and then he made me discard the other one. Yeah, just through attrition, I wasn't able to chew through him fast enough, and he milled me out. It was close. It was like the difference of like 2 actions. It was a very good game against my buddy Corwin.
It's a tough deck to play. It's a very popular deck around here, and there are moments where you just want to bash your head against the table because it just chokes you out, and it either denies you your resources, denies you your hand, and it just makes you play differently than any other matchup.
I also played against Akbar Leia, and long story short, he got the completely disgusting it's a trap playoff before I could knock Akbar out. Like, I knew it was coming, and I was trying to, get that all set up and to push him down, but I didn't get there, and he managed to do, 12 damage in one go, and he killed both the Trooper and the Night Sister in one volley, and Akbar had, 3 damage on him and 3 shields after that point, so it was pretty much donezo from there.
Yeah. I love Leia Akbar. I've talked about it a lot on Jedi Trials, but that is definitely my baby, and we're going to be talking about it more in the future. But that it's a trap, especially if you can go hit and run into it's a trap or something like that. It's very, very good when you can pull it off against ranged decks. If melee comes back really strong or just continues to grow as is, it won't be as good, but it's fun.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's a deck you have to respect, and that deck is definitely going places. I'm sure Spirit of the Rebellion is going to give, like, maybe not necessarily Leia Akbar, but like pure red trap deck is probably going to turn some heads and do some terrible things.
Yeah. Although Leia Akbar specifically too, I think one of the things that people forget is, you have 4 dice that have focus on them to start the game. So you're way less reliant on rerolls and pitching cards, because you can use a Leia 1 focus to change Akbar into 2 focus, which changes 2 dice into 5 damage or something like that. There's a lot of like tricks that you can do specifically with those dice on the table. But you're still right. I think Spirit Rebellion could introduce some interesting red characters like Mon Mothma or something that maybe has different options on the table than what Akbar Leia brings right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And then my last round opponent, she was playing Django Double Trooper. By this point, I was pretty frustrated, so again, I was on tilt, and that led me to doing some really weird sequencing plays where like I resolved stuff before I would resolve like a full mind probe. I don't know why I did that. At one point, she's playing ranged and I played isolation instead of deflect, which there's absolutely it was a character die, so I for some reason just like zeroed in on isolation when deflect was the right call, and all sorts of little mistakes made me lose by like 2 damage.
Oof. And
it was just silly. Like that match should have gone a lot better. So, I learned that I need to practice with Villain Blue more. I only played it extremely briefly in my like very, very early Dooku days, and I did a little bit of Django Kylo testing that didn't really work out. But coming back to it though, it feels pretty good. Again, I feel like a couple of slots in here are kind of to force the blue synergy and to get the most out of No Mercy, and I would prefer, like not having to use like From the Shadows. I like the card, but again, like I'd prefer, more impactful, aggressive stuff. But overall, that's the deck, and I feel like my losses were more attributed to myself than the deck. Not saying the deck like should have won everything all the time, but interesting, very close matches. The thing was, the matches were always super close, and so had I made 1 or 2 less errors, I probably could have turned it over. So that felt good, and I do think this deck is an interesting shell with a lot of potential. So I'm gonna keep playing it and keep messing with it and keep you guys updated and try it again this Saturday after I run it through the Gambit on some of my friends. Ironically, I wanted to make this deck to beat Vader Raider, and I didn't play Vader Raider, so that was also in its own right disappointing.
Yeah.
So I have a couple questions that I'm sure people listening are definitely going to want to know. So the fact that you're running 2 characters that can be guardianed with Phasma, and, D-House, you've done it too, so I'd love your input. First of all, do you use the effect, considering that your Night Sister can deal damage to herself to reroll? So there's 2 ways to damage the Night Sister pretty quickly, and then both of them have pretty weak health. So, and now on top of that, you're running the best defense, which deals 3 damage. So are you using them to eat dice? Are you using them as bodies? Like, what is the purpose? Obviously, the Night Sister gives you access to all the blue, but what do you use the non-unique characters for during your games?
So I usually send the trooper running, screaming into whatever he can pull off, especially if there's modifieds floating around. Obviously, you want to try to use your defensive events if available and keep everyone as healthy as possible. I'm never too upset to pull a 1 damage off with a Night Sister. That's essentially her effect, but better, because she would have dealt 1 damage to herself anyway, and this way the die is removed instead of re-rolled. So pulling 1s with Night Sister is something I do actively, but I usually leave the heavier stuff to the poor trooper. But I didn't often Guardian with the Night Sister, but it's still always nice to have the option. Also, when they're on their deathbeds, when they're sitting at 6 damage, if they can jump on grenades and hop on a 2 or a 3, then like pull extra, that's also always handy. And sometimes, again, like like I lost most of my games by a handful of damage, and them being able to do that often yields really solid results. There's nothing better than a 6 damage stormtrooper getting the best defensed.
Yeah, I think like my list is a little more heavy on the red side. When I put the deck together with Night Sister, the biggest thing I wanted was just the holocrons in there with, and I'm just running Force Choke, Force Throw, Mind Probe. And then on events, I have 2 Deflect, 2 Feel Your Anger, and 1 Intimidate on the blue side. The only thing that is pretty much useless once the Night Sister dies is Deflect, and then obviously the Force abilities. If I don't have holocron out, I can't hard cast those. But so I guess I'm a little bit more liberal in letting her Guardian away damage, but I'll probably look at the Trooper first before going to the Night Sister. But I do think bringing blue into the deck, whether you run it like hyper blue the way that Jay's running it, or more of just a balanced kind of red-blue, because her die is great too. Yeah, I mean, you'd think, that 1 range damage, 2 range damage for 8 cost is helpful. It's really good. So I don't use her ability too much unless there's something I really can't deal with. Like I know there's one I hadn't activated Trooper or Phasma yet, and there was a Force Throw special on the table, and I just don't even want to roll them out. So I hurt Night Sister twice to get rid of that Force Throw special, and it worked, and then I rolled out and did a lot of damage. So, again, I think the deck just gives you a lot of options for controlling dice and lets you control what comes at you and when it comes at you, which is really nice in this game.
Okay. And then another question. This is probably more for you, D-House, than Jay, but what are some good matchups and bad matchups? Since, we're all kind of familiar with Ibala and buddies, Jango and buddies, your Darth Vader with, a Jabba or a Raider. And we've seen very consistently that there's going to be certain decks you're going to see at your local game store. So how would you say this fares against some of those more popular decks?
I think I need some more tournament experience before I speak too authoritatively on that. I think it is a little bit slower than the Ibala Jango Trooper deck. So, like I said, you want to be able to control where their dice goes, where the damage goes, but when Jango is doing what Jango does and activating and resolving before you can even do anything, you're kind of stuck with that. I think any decks that can pop off the Trooper or Night Sister really quickly, any decks that can get to that 7 damage are really strong. It takes a while for this to collect all the damage together. So I haven't played the matchup, but I feel like Luke Akbar would be tough. At least with my version. I don't know about Jay's version. His might actually be stronger with more blue, but any kind of blue decks that with deflect and control like that, I think would be pretty tough matchups. But again, I probably need a little bit more experience, specifically tournament experience, before I'm too strong on those opinions.
Yeah, so if you pop off the Night Sister, the deck struggles greatly. Also, a lot of people have said, like, does your deck do anything if you don't have Holocron? And I argue it does. Obviously, Holocron does work, and if you don't draw it, play aggressively, draw heavily, and try to get those out, obviously. But, the characters still hit pretty hard on their own. It still does, like, the potential, like, base 6 or 8 damage on their character dice, period. And again, that's also another reason to maybe consider keeping F11 in there, because that's just plain and simple. Also, lastly, the area that frustrates me a little bit with this deck is that it doesn't really have a lot of good options for shields. I don't love the card Intimidate personally. I could see that maybe going in if maybe Ranged fell out of favor for Deflect, but I still don't feel like I would enjoy that. Just because, Deflect it's so good when it's good. It's a removal damage card. It's gross, but yeah, it's got shield trouble. Choke pierces through it. Hopefully you can overwhelm with Power of the Force and No Mercy and, eat through them if you have to, but that's another area I'm hoping maybe can be circumvented, and it's another thing to kind of be worried about. So shields and losing Night Sister are kind of the two weaknesses I've foreseen for this deck, but it's definitely not helpless in those cases.
All right, that sounds really great. These decks I mean, even though there's multiple ways to put cards into the deck, the shell is still, Night Sister Trooper, Phasma, and it sounds really interesting. So I'm intrigued to try it out. And then the next thing we definitely want to tackle, and this is going to be a lot of fun, we are going to go over a couple cards from the Awakening set that we think will be improved or perhaps find more value, not in fiscal money, but in play commodity. Once the new set comes out from Spirit of Rebellion, we want to talk about some of the cards we think are going to see more play, see more power creep. They're going to be much more useful because of, such and such. So since you're our guest, D-House, why don't you tell us one of the cards you think is going to see a little bit more play or, get that power level increase when the new set comes out?
I think I'll go with Grievous, General Grievous. He's one of those guys that he obviously has seen a lot of play with Grievous Dooku. We've even seen Grievous Balatik. But ultimately, I think the overall consensus is that he costs a lot. I mean, 13, 18 is a lot to commit to him. He's got great die with 2 melee, 3 melee for a resource. So, but your options are limited. And then, of course, being red, there's not a lot of great red villain weapons that merge with his melee. And so his options have been fairly limited. So I think any kind of new villain options, new character combinations, we're going to be able to see him a lot more. One off the top of my head already, we've done a little bit of TTS testing with this with Corey at Jedi Trials, is the new Vader, Elite Vader with Grievous, just 1 die Grievous, and that combination, without knowing any of the other cards that are coming in Spirit of Rebellion, is very strong, and it's a lot of melee damage. And in one of our test games, he just, without any upgrades, rolled out 9 damage just like that. And so it's stuff like that where I think Grievous's time is still to come. And obviously his ability is very strong. He's just kind of pigeonholed into one kind of main deck. So I think he's one that could definitely improve with the next expansion.
Yeah, I definitely like Grievous a lot. And if there were just, a couple more weapons or even like events that let him cheat a little in some ways of just like making him more efficient, like monetarily or action economy or anything, just I think would push him over. Yeah, I feel like he's close. That was a very good choice.
Yeah, with Grievous, a lot of people at my local stores will ask me, what I think about this card or that card, and he comes out a lot. And the biggest problem I personally have with him is the color red right now has 0 synergy with his die faces. Red right now is heavy into guns and range damage, and so to make Grievous shine and get the most out of his dice, you pretty much have to pair him with blue, because you need holocrons, you need those lightsabers, you need what blue has for Grievous. And since the point costs are kind of wonky and there's very few options to pair with him efficiently, I agree. Like with the new Spirit of Rebellion stuff, especially, we've seen Darth Vader, Dark Apprentice. He works super well with Grievous because you can deal a lot of damage. You can have a 3-die starting team, and it's tanky and it's nasty. And we haven't even started talking about equipping stuff to either of those characters. And you can god roll 3 damage on all of the 3 die and just crush someone really quickly.
Yep, it's scary. It's like I said, if you can take the target off of him a little bit and onto somebody else, I think that's where he begins to shine. Otherwise, obviously, with 10 health, he just gets burned down quickly. So anytime you can take a little bit of attention off of him, make someone else a little dangerous, his die, and he's going to be a very upgraded character by the end of the game. So if you can keep him alive, but I think he definitely has more potential.
Cool. All right, Jay, what's one of your cards of choice?
I'm going to cheat and pick 2, but both same color, same affiliation. I feel like right now, unless you are called Backup Muscle, and to a much lesser extent, it binds all things and one with the Force, there are really not a lot of supports that hit the board reliably. But I feel like as the pedal gets depressed a little more off aggro, and there's more options and there's more interesting supports to be played, I do think that Surgical Strike is going to probably become more relevant and possibly prevalent in an environment where there's more supports to be nervous about. And so I think that card, I always think about it. And whenever I mess with Hero, I always think like, it's not necessarily worth hitting a backup muscle unless you hit it like before they've been able to resolve one tick of it. But even then, that's kind of dream scenario. But I do like Surgical Strike. And then also, I really like the card Commando Raid. And I really want there to be more options to use that card than just Akbar. I just love that it, cantrips, so you play it and then you get a card back and it hits for 3. It'd be cool if it could hit for 4 on something with a 2 discard side or just synergize with more reliable, fun discard effects. I'm not even much of a mill player, but I do love hammering cards out of my opponent's hand. I don't necessarily, those like lend to similar strategies, but I do think that in some places in mid-range and aggro decks, like hit discard has its place, and so I really, really hope Commando Raid gets some love.
Yeah, I totally agree, and this is my theory. We know that Mon Mothma is coming, and it's not exactly, she doesn't exactly look like the most dangerous gunslinger of all of them, so my thought is if she's coming, I have to think that she's got some discard side, maybe some disrupt, more of like a Jabba kind of a role for red. And so I think my theory is that she'll have a 2 discard and Commando Raid will just go with her like perfectly. I think that's going to be a thing that comes because I would like to see that card more. Right now you can just run it with Akbar and it's just not worth it, to be playing for that one role and have a, card taking up a slot in your deck. But that's really good. And then Surgical Strike I think is a great option as well. I know there's nothing worse. I was playing Leia Akbar. I had Launch Bay out, and I had just played Launch Bay, and he had a 1 range and a 2 range showing, and he played Surgical Strike and immediately discarded my Launch Bay before I could even activate it. And it's just crushing when that stuff happens. So I agree. I think the more supports come out that are more dangerous, it'll continue to see play.
Yeah, I completely agree. Mine is probably one of the more popular ones people have talked about because this specifically triggers with Jyn Erso, and that's Reversal. This is a 3-cost neutral yellow card, and it just says spot a yellow character to remove a die showing melee or range damage and deal that damage to a character. And realistically, if you're going to have a card that costs 3, it has to do a lot because that's essentially a turn and a half of your economy, not counting, your characters rolling out resources. But still, 3 is, there's so many options that are amazing in the current set. Force Throw, you could put something cheaper on like a Force Choke, you could put out an Immobilize. Like there's a lot of cards that have recyclable removal effects, so this just happens once, so it has to be super good. And the fact that with Jyn you can play it if it's your first event of the yellow event of the turn, the cost is reduced by 1, which makes it not only a 2-drop, but it makes it something that you can play fairly consistently now because yellow has a lot of resource generation for hero, and you have enough ways and means to get money to play cards on top of have enough money to keep this in your pocket if someone plays out something crazy, especially with, I suspect we're going to see a lot more supports, and that means we're going to see a lot more big damage coming out of things like, Millennium Falcon. I think we're going to see ATST hit the field a little bit more frequently than right now because not many people play it and even fewer people get it to the table. But when it hits, like that card just hurts really bad. And this is great because Reversal can deal with big threats, but it can also deal with, hey, somebody rolled out a character and they're sitting on, 3 range damage for 1 resource. Cool, shoot him in the face. And the best part is they take the entire amount of damage. Like it's so good because that swing is astronomical if you remove a die and just punch him right in the face.
I love Reversal. One of my decks, I run Elite Admiral Akbar with 2 hired guns, so it produces a ton of money, and I have 2 reversals in there, and it is so powerful, especially for like Vader Raider matchups when Vader rolls out that 3 melee. And you can remove it and get damage on Vader, good damage on Vader. It's extremely strong. Not that all my examples need to be about it, but I've had my Launch Bay 5 range damage reversaled into my face, which hurts so bad. So I agree. I think Reversal in a Jyn Erso deck is going to be very good because you can play that on the first turn. Again, for those 3 melee decks that come at you, the Lukes, whatever. To be able to play that without needing to worry about resources first is going to be so good. So I totally agree. I think Reversal is going to be around for a long time.
I will say, I don't necessarily see Reversal being used outside of Jin Urso, because at this point, we haven't seen any other cost reducers, so everyone else is still going to have to pay the 3, which I don't know. I definitely would pay 2 for that card. I'm not totally sure I would pay 3, even with a high resource generation deck with, like, Akbar and Hired Guns. That's still really expensive. And if I have the 3, I'd probably rather get out or save the money to get out like a Millennium Falcon or Launch Bay like turn 2. It's in that weird spot of like 2 is great, 3 is rough, because for another 1 or 2 more resources, you can play some heavy hitters that will constantly be on the field putting pressure on your opponent. So it's in a weird space, but I definitely believe that once Jin hits the field, you're going to see Reversal in those decks, and you really need to respect that card because, you can play at any point you want, and if you happen to roll out Vader with that 3 damage turn 1, that could turn into a lot of damage in your face real fast.
One of the cards I was thinking about, too, with Spirit Rebellion that could continue to get better is Infamous, the yellow support that turns your, you can exhaust it to turn your next yellow card into Ambush.
Yeah.
Because of cards like Reversal, you can Reversal into, for cheap with Jin and then Electroshock, and so just remove damage really quickly. You can, Infamous will make cards like Never Tell Me the Odds, a new one coming out, changing all your all your character dice and upgrade dice to something and then resolving it. I think Infamous is just one of those cards that will make cards like Reversal and other yellow events really good, because the more yellow events we get, the more Ambush will be important to be able to maximize their impact on the game.
Yeah, I totally agree. One other card I want to talk about, and this is a card I've been trying to make work really hard in my Jabba Vader deck, and I've had actually massive success with it. But the more I play it, the more I think it's actually going to go up in value, is Prize Possession. And this card, it is expensive, and it is a unique, so you can't have 2 of them out, which would be insanely broken. But the fact that this can just pull a die off of someone, and as we saw with a Lucas ruling, you can't use Prize Possession unless the die has actually been rolled and in your opponent's pool. So you can't snipe a die off of a card like, before someone rolls. But Prize Possession, it does a couple of things that I really like, and I feel like, I don't know why, I just think like it's going to become a lot more commonplace once Spirit of Rebellion comes out. But the first thing it does is it allows you to redirect pressure. So, for example, like I've played games where people are just crunching onto Vader, and they're, he's got like, maybe 9-10 damage on him. He can totally be killed fairly quickly, and I'll pull a Prize Possession out and stick it on Jabba, and for some reason people just divert all damage, and Jabba has like no damage on him whatsoever, and they try and kill Jabba so they can get that die back, and Vader just sits there completely unscathed. And so it's really nice, because you now have people trying to worry about like, how do I get my die back? How am I going to make my character function? Because a lot of equipment triggers off of what a character does. So the other thing Prize Possession is really great for is someone rolls out a huge amount of damage, and the crux of it sits on a character. And when you hit them for that Prize Possession, they don't really know what to do. And it's even more fun when you use an overwrite on something where, say, you have like a 2-cost card that you're not really using on a character. Well, instead of paying the hard 4, you can pay 2, and you get a really dirty removal card that now it throws people off, because you don't see it very often. And with all of the new stuff coming out, with all of the, especially like, we've talked about Palpatine, Prize Possession on Palpatine is just awful, because his die deal damage just by resolving anything. So turning off half of that is really, really good. It's really bad for Palpatine players, but it's really good if you have the Prize Possession getting played onto the field. I mean, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I think if Palpatine decks really start to take control, I think Prize Possession and the new battlefield, the Carbon Freezing Chamber, will be fairly important. Its cost, it is hard for me. Obviously, it needs to be costed there. I think it's balanced, but it'll be interesting to see specifically with Palpatine. Other decks that have just 3 starting die, I think it's very good. It starts to become less useful when you hit that 4 starting dice, those kind of decks. But Prize Possession is good. Obviously, as you mentioned, the timing of when you play it is important, that because they have to have the die out in the field, and so that can kind of mess with you too. But obviously playing any combination of prize position and the carbon freezing chamber would be like, the best case scenario. If you just could remove both of their die from a character, that's really great too. So I think it's good. I think it could boost play for sure.
In both cases of this card in reversal as well, they're already really strong options. I find it interesting that the timing window came up on things like prize possession when inarguably you want to almost always play it after they rolled something good anyway, and use it also as a combo removal card. So that was kind of an interesting question that came up during a tournament. People were kind of upset, it was ruled that the die has to be in play, and people kind of scoffed. And I was like, but that's when I would, I don't know, that's when you play it. I mean, sure, you can use it as a preventative measure, but I don't know, denying them is oh so satisfying. Plus, amusingly, you can just imagine it as they just literally ran into the carbon freezing chamber. But all right, I'm coming. Oh crap. So anyway, yeah, I mean, I already think the card's strong, and as there are better targets, it's true. Palpatine, he's gonna have a bad time, but possibly we might have better upgrade removal as well on the flip side. So maybe Palpatine will be really good at getting out of that scenario. Who knows? Still good picks. I mean, the comment about the escalation of if supports get better, supposedly dies get fatter, and then reversal gets juicier. That's all true, and I agree with that. So yeah, and again, we're just spitballing and thinking on stuff. As a lot of people have said, there's still 100+ cards that we have to see. There's tons of characters, upgrades, abilities, whatever, that we have no idea what's coming. So we just thought we would talk a little bit about a few cards that don't see as much play or kind of niche or whatever, just for the heck of it, to get you thinking. Theory crafting, never hurts. And so yeah, as we see more stuff, if we notice more, cool little interactions, we'll let you know. I really like I didn't even think of Grievous and Dark Apprentice. That's already really awesome.
Yes, it is very strong. Yeah, I think that other cards, that you don't see a lot, like Return of the Jedi, to get a blue event from your discard pile. Every time an expansion comes out and adds new blue events to the game, I think that's a card you're going to look at and be like, ooh, I want to be able to play that card 3 or 4 times, not just twice. I feel that way about All In a lot. I always want to get the All In card back in my hand to be able to do shenanigans with focus sides. And so I think Return of the Jedi is another one of those that, I don't know that we've seen its full potential yet, but depending on what happens. Because, I mean, we even saw, this week, you guys posted on your Facebook page, there's some kind of yellow upgrade with Maz Kanata on it, and it has, the top 2 sides are 1 focus and then 2 focus, and it costs 1. And I'm thinking, I don't even care what the rest of the card says. A 1 cost upgrade for yellow that has a 2 focus on it. Those are types of things that are going to definitely affect the game in powerful ways. So I love not knowing even just the things that we don't know right now. But I love to speculate as well.
Right. And that's the fun of it. We may be right, we may be wrong, but any kind of card that relies on, like Finn is a great example. Finn gets better regardless of the set because his effect gives him access to red vehicles and red weapons. And you're going to see more of those in every set, which means he has more options, more choices, which means he's going to be better because every time something new comes out, now he has more ammunition in his gun. So, cards like that will always increase in playability. But then there's always other cards where it really depends on the meta. It really depends on what people are playing, and it really depends on the construction of a deck, which is exactly why I feel the way I do about prize possession is I think we're going to see a lot of single character decks come out. Even though they'll have 3 or 4 dice in their pool to start, I still think you're going to have a lot of very susceptible characters that you can just snipe out their die and turn them off really quickly. So we'll see. It may be right, maybe not, but it's super fun to speculate and just kind of, get those gears turning like Jay was saying and think about, what cards do we not see that we probably will see? Because there's obviously seeds in this set. Commando Raid is a perfect example. That card is going to see play. It just is in a set where there's not there's only 2 targets. You've got Akbar and Launch Bay. So it'll see more targets, which means it'll see more play, and that's going to be really fun to drop that on somebody. All right, so as we wrap up the show, D-House, why don't you plug Jedi Trials one more time? Tell where can we find you? What can we listen for? What's coming up? Any kind of secrets or surprises you can tell our audience?
Absolutely. Check us out on iTunes. Just search The Jedi Trials. Also online, you can stream it at thejeditrials.com, or check out our YouTube Destiny videos at Across the Saga on YouTube there. We've got some fun stuff coming up. I'm going to get together with another guy that loves the Leia Akbar shenanigan deck, and we're going to kind of break that down in detail, just to talk about what it does, how it does it, and why everybody should also be playing it. So we're excited about that, and obviously with Worlds coming up soon, we may be talking a little bit about how to be thinking in terms of that kind of a competition as well. So would love for you guys to check us out. If you feel like you're a good person and you're not a bad guy, a Sith kind of person, come over. You'll
be dead by the end of the show. So
I think I got that special on Force Choke. So action.
Perfect. But yeah, thanks so much for having me on, and obviously listen to you guys the day it comes out. So it's great content.
We here at the Knights of Ren are super proud to announce that we are a sponsor of the Steel Open 2017, happening April 7th through 9 in Herndon, Virginia. You can find out more information at steelopen.com, where you can find out the events for not only Destiny, but X-Wing, Armada, and so much more. And you can also register yourself for this 3-day super amazing private event. Definitely check this out if you're interested in Destiny or any kind of Star Wars tabletop events. This is the premier place to check out games and get ready for Worlds, because this is happening 1 month before Worlds. You don't want to miss out. SteelOpen.com. All right, and with that being said, this is the end of our show. We'd like to give a big shout out once again, as always. Thank you to so much to our Patreons. Thank you to everyone who's supporting us, be it through Patreon, reviews, likes, shares, posts. Just a big thank you to the community. That's really the biggest reason why we do this, is we love interacting with our community. We love talking with people. We get questions all the time about decks. We talk with people on Discord. It's just a lot of fun to meet new people and talk about the game and build a community around the game, and just have a really fun time with people from everywhere across the world. So thank you so very much for your patronage. Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining us in this adventure of Star Wars Destiny. And with that being said, do check out the Jedi Trials. Even though we are villainous and they are Jedi scum, cough, it is a really solid show, and we love talking with D-House and Kumaster. They're just really solid folks. Thank you for listening. Have a great week, and may the Force be with you.